I'm looking at two notifications on my phone right now, side by side, and they don't make sense together. One is my paycheck, deposited the way it's deposited every other Friday, same amount it's been for the last year, down to the cent. The other is a dividend and investment income deposit that landed in a different account an hour earlier. I've seen that second number plenty of times before. It's never once been the bigger one. I keep switching between the two screens, like one of them is going to change if I look at it again, and neither of them does. And I'm sitting here on my kitchen counter at 7 in the morning, trying to figure out if I should feel something bigger than I actually feel right now. I don't know yet whether this is a fluke or the new normal. I won't know for a few more weeks. But this specific Friday, for the first time in my life, the money I didn't work for outpaced the money I did. I'm not going to tell you the actual numbers yet, but by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it took to get two deposits that close, and what happened the next time I opened my laptop for work. Here's what most people picture when they hear, "Your investments make more than your job." Some dramatic scene, quitting on the spot, walking out mid-meeting, never looking back. That image is almost entirely wrong, and it's wrong in a way that actually matters, because it convinces people this milestone is either a fantasy or an ending, when it's really just a quiet shift in leverage that happens while your life looks basically the same from the outside. Hello everyone, I'm Liam. Normally on this channel I break down other people's numbers. This time I'm just turning the camera on my own, because I think the version of this story that actually happened is more useful than a hypothetical one. If that's the kind of honest breakdown you're into, subscribing means you'll catch the next one too. Quick disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't personalized financial advice, and my specific numbers and timeline reflect my situation, not a guarantee of anyone else's results. So here's the actual claim this video is built around. The moment investment income crosses job income isn't the finish line people think it is. It's closer to a handoff, one that happens quietly, usually without fireworks, and almost never on the day you'd expect it to. And once you understand what that handoff actually requires, you'll understand exactly why I was still sitting at my kitchen counter with my laptop bag by the door, not walking out of anything. Picture a relay race with two runners, except only one of them starts on the gun. The first runner takes off immediately full speed from second one, because a paycheck starts paying you the moment you take the job. There's no ramp up. You work a week, you get paid for a week. The second runner is still lacing their shoes at the starting line while the first one's already 100 meters out, because investment income doesn't start moving until there's actually money sitting somewhere generating it, and in the beginning, there's barely any money there at all. For years, that gap looks enormous and permanent. The first runner is so far ahead it barely seems worth watching the second one at all. But here's what a paycheck can't do that an investment account can. The first runner's speed is capped. Raises happen occasionally, in small increments, and then plateau for years at a time. The second runner never gets a raise in the traditional sense, but they also never stop accelerating, because every lap they run adds to a pool that starts generating its own additional speed on top of theirs. Eventually, almost always further down the track than anyone expects, the accelerating runner catches the capped one. Not because they got faster all at once, but because they never stopped compounding while the other one just kept running the same pace. I started my own race with basically nothing extra to invest, 5 years before that Friday morning. I wasn't thinking about relay races. I was thinking about whether $400 a month was actually worth setting aside instead of just living a little easier that month. That $400 a month is exactly where this gets specific, and the number it turned into is bigger than you're picturing. Let's talk about the actual finish line, because beat your job means something different depending on what your job pays. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, median weekly earnings for full-time workers in the first quarter of 2026 sat at $1,235, which annualizes to roughly $64,220 a year. That's the number a huge share of working Americans are actually trying to outrun, whether they've ever framed it that way or not. Here's where most finance content gets sloppy. It treats your investments make more than your job as some vague vibe, instead of doing the actual math on what that requires. Using the widely cited 4% safe withdrawal guideline, the idea that a diversified portfolio can generally sustain withdrawals of about 4% a year without running out matching that $64,220, median salary purely through investment income requires a portfolio of roughly $1,605,500, not $1 million. Not enough to feel comfortable. A specific, calculable number that scales directly with whatever income it's trying to replace. That number does something interesting psychologically, because it turns an abstract feeling, "I want my money to work for me," into a fixed target you can actually track your progress against. The same way a runner can see the finish line instead of just running until they feel tired. Vague goals get abandoned. Specific ones, even huge ones, tend to get chased. And the path from $0 to $1,605,500 is exactly where the relay race stops being a metaphor and starts being a spreadsheet. Here's the math on getting there using the exact number I mentioned earlier. Invest $400 a month at a historical average return around 8%, a reasonable long-term assumption for a diversified stock portfolio, and you'd need roughly 33 years to reach $1,605,500. That's a full career, which is honestly the realistic timeline for most people starting from scratch on an average income. And it's worth saying plainly instead of pretending otherwise. Push the monthly contribution to $1,200 instead of $400. Same 8% return, and that same $1,605,500 target arrives in roughly 24 years, 9 years faster. Not because the strategy changed, but because the fuel going into it tripled. Push it further to $2,000 a month, and you're looking at around 20 years. The relationship isn't linear. Either tripling your contribution doesn't just triple your speed, because more money sitting in the account earlier means more of it is compounding for longer, which is the entire unfair advantage of starting big or starting early over starting late and modest. My own $400 a month, 5 years before that Friday, wasn't going to get me to $1,605,500 in 5 years. It wasn't supposed to. What it was doing, quietly, was building the base of a runner who was about to start accelerating in ways my paycheck simply couldn't match. One raise at a time, forever capped, while my investment account had no ceiling on how fast it could eventually move. But $1,605,500 isn't actually the number that showed up on my screen that Friday morning, and what did show up is stranger than the target itself. Here's how rare it actually is to get anywhere near that kind of crossover, because the data makes it clear this isn't a common milestone. According to Fidelity Investments, there were 645,401 millionaires in the US. As of the first quarter of 2026 people, holding at least $1 million in that single account type alone. That's up 26% from a year earlier, which sounds like rapid growth until you remember it's still a tiny sliver of the roughly 121 million full-time workers in the country. Here's the detail that matters more than the headline number. According to Fidelity, the average 401k millionaire is close to age 59 and has been contributing to that same account for an average of 25 years. Not a hot stock pick, not a lucky year in the market, 25 years of the same runner in the same lane, never stopping. That's the piece almost nobody wants to hear, because it's not exciting. There's no shortcut hiding in that data. The crossover point where investment income realistically starts rivaling a median salary isn't a secret formula, it's 2.5 decades of a relay handoff most people give up on somewhere around year 3, right when the accelerating runner still looks impossibly far behind. And that exact discouragement, right around year 3 or 4, is almost precisely where I nearly quit my own race, which is a part of this I don't usually talk about. Here's what actually changes, day to day, once that crossover gets close, and it's smaller and stranger than the fantasy version. I didn't quit my job that Friday. I'm not planning to next Friday either. What changed is how the job feels to sit inside of. Meetings that used to feel like something I had to survive started feeling like something I was choosing to be in. A frustrating email from a client landed differently because for the first time, a bad week at work wasn't a threat to anything beyond that week itself. It changes negotiating, the same way it does for anyone who's built any kind of financial flaw. You ask for things you'd have swallowed before, because the cost of someone saying no stopped being catastrophic. It changes how much energy a bad boss or a toxic project can actually take from you, because there's finally a real alternative sitting quietly in an account instead of just an idea of one. None of that requires actually leaving. It just requires the leaving to be genuinely possible, which turns out to change almost everything about how the staying feels. I want to be honest about something, because this whole video would be dishonest without it. Reaching anything close to this crossover requires disposable income to invest consistently for decades, real market returns that aren't guaranteed, and enough stability that a bad year doesn't force you to pull the money back out. None of those 3 things are equally available to everyone, and a lot of people are doing everything right and still won't get here on a normal salary alone, through no fault of their own. That's not a motivational gap, it's math, running into wages and costs that individual effort doesn't fully control. But here's the reframe worth taking regardless of your starting line. This was never really about beating your job in some dramatic, permanent sense. It's about the job stopping being the only runner in the race. Even someone years away from any real crossover point gets something the moment they start the second runner, moving at all the simple, verifiable fact that their income isn't the only thing keeping them afloat anymore, however small that second income currently is. Now let's go back to that kitchen counter, because I still haven't told you what happened after I closed frame both of those apps. I closed the banking app first, then the brokerage app, and I picked up my laptop bag like I do every other weekday, because nothing about that morning actually required me to do anything different. I went to work, I sat in the same meetings, I answered the same emails I would have answered, regardless of which number had been bigger that Friday. But somewhere around mid-morning, in a meeting that would normally have made me check the clock 4 times, I noticed I wasn't checking it at all. Not because the meeting got more interesting, because for the first time, some quiet part of my brain understood that I was in that room by continued choice, not by necessity. And that distinction did something to how the whole day felt that I genuinely wasn't expecting. I still don't know if last Friday was a fluke, or the actual new shape of things. Dividend income moves around. Some months it'll dip back below my paycheck again, and that's fine. That was never really the point. The point was never the single Friday where the numbers happened to cross. It was the 5 years of $400 a month that made that Friday possible at all, whether or not it repeats next month. You don't need your job to disappear, you just need it to stop being the only runner on your team.